Bueno, para abrir el día de hoy tenemos la conferencia del director de la Agencia Internacional de Energía Renovable, IRENA, el señor Francesco Lacamera, quien hablará del rol de las nuevas tecnologías en el desarrollo sostenible de la economía, con especial énfasis en el desarrollo de tecnologías de almacenamiento y desarrollo de hidrógeno. El doctor Francesco Lacamera tiene más de 30 años de experiencia manejando temas como clima, sostenibilidad y cooperación internacional. Se ha desempeñado como director general de Desarrollo Sostenible y Daño Ambiental en el Ministerio de Ambiente, Tierra y Mar de Italia, como coordinador nacional de Clima, Medio Ambiente, Eficiencia de Recursos y Economía Circular. Encabezó la delegación italiana de la COP21 a la 24 de la Convención Marco de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Cambio Climático y la presidencia de la Unión Europea en la COP20. También fue responsable de la preparación y organización de la presidencia de Medio Ambiente de Italia en el G7. Le damos un saludo de bienvenida al doctor Lacamera. Adelante.
So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a pleasure to join you all today to share the perspectives of IRENA at this occasion. Thank you for having me. For those who may not be familiar with our organization, IRENA is the global intergovernmental organization that is leading the global discourse on energy transition. We have 164 members, including Colombia, and some other 20 countries in the process of accession. We provide knowledge, tools, and platform for cooperation to accelerate all aspects of the energy transformation. Our work is more relevant today than ever, because as we grapple with the twin challenge of climate change and the global health crisis. The science on climate change is clear. According to the IPCC Special Report 1.5 Celsius, energy emission must reach zero in 2050. We are entering the decade which will define whether we have a fighting chance in keeping temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Our latest analysis, the World Energy Transition Outlook Preview, sets out the step to take us there. Of course, every country has their own strategy, but certain trends are emerging. Moreover, our options are clear. We must accelerate the deployment of the existing solutions while innovating for the future. In our analysis, we see 6 key avenues for emission reduction with renewables, efficiency, and electrification that will provide the bulk for the CO2 abatement by 2050. The most important synergy in the global energy transition, in addition to efficiency, is the combination of the increasing use of low-cost renewable power technologies and the wider adoption of electricity to power end-use sectors like transport and heat. Electricity will become the main energy carrier in 2050. That means the global electricity generation must expand threefold, with renewables providing 90% of the total supply by mid-century. Achieving this level of transformation could require both redirection of about 1/3 of the already planned investment of $98 trillion of US dollar towards clean solution, and adding another 33 trillions of US dollar by 2050 globally. This includes both public and private investments. Government funds, including the short-term stimulus and recovery funds, can leverage private investment by a factor of 3 or 4. They must be used strategically to guide investment decisions toward energy transition priorities. And this level of investment is achievable, especially in view of falling cost of renewables. Today, renewables are the least option for new capacity in almost all parts of the world. Cost for electricity from utility-scale solar PV fell 82% between 2010 and the last year. Our most reports on cost show that the share of renewable energy that achieve lower cost than the most competitive fossil fuel option doubled in 2020. 162 gigawatt, or 62% of total renewable power generation added last year at lower cost than the cheapest new fossil fuel option. New solar and wind projects are increasingly undercutting even the operating-only costs of existing coal-fired power plants. The funding of our latest capacity report that was launched a few weeks ago showed that more than 260 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity was added globally in 2020, beating the previous record by almost 50%. More than 80% of all new electricity added last year was renewable. Latin America has long relied on its abundant hydro, but increasing solar and wind are leading the additions. This accounted for almost 12% of the installed capacity in the region, around 55 gigawatts in 2020. Colombia is leading in the deployment of renewables in the region, with close to 3,000 megawatts of solar and wind projects assigned in the last auction. The share of variable renewable, thanks to this last option, will reach more than 12% by 2022. ARENA has been a close partner of Colombia in this journey, and it will continue to be. In 2018, we worked with the Colombian Energy Planning Authority on a study to integrate variable renewables in the power system. Colombia's leadership role is also recognized by ARENA Coalition for Action, a group of private companies and investors supporting renewables investment worldwide. The Coalition 2020 report on emerging markets identifies Colombia amongst the 5 most promising emerging markets for renewables investment. So, in Colombia and globally, the power sector is heading towards the right direction. But if we want to be on the pathway to 1.5 degrees, we need to go beyond the power sector and decarbonize the end-use sectors such as industry, heat, and transport. Today, we have a unique opening to accelerate change with the far-reaching recovery efforts. At ARENA, we have been clear that recovery measures and any short-term efforts must be in line with the medium to long-term objective of sustainable developments and climate efforts. And investment in the energy transition could bring immediate benefits, a much-needed boost in these times of economic uncertainty. We estimate that $6 trillion investment in this 3 years, so by 2023, just over double from the current investment in energy transition would create additional 5.5 million jobs. Each $1 million invested will create 25 jobs in renewables and infrastructure. The same investment will create 10 jobs in energy efficiency. GDP will be boosted by an additional 1% per year on average. But let me stress that this will be materialized if there are right policies to place to drive this transformation. This is not just a fuel replacement, but a creation of a new system. Policies supporting renewables energy deployment remain at the heart of the energy transition. But to realize a system change, there are not enough. We need frameworks that link efficiency and infrastructure to the deployment of renewables to enable their share. We need measures to ensure that industrial and other economic capabilities are aligned with development and climate objectives. At the same time, we need labor policies to create the workforce of the future and social protection for fossil fuel workers to retrain and develop new careers. At the end of this month, we will release our full World Energy Transition Outlook. This will include a detailed socioeconomic footprint of the pathway. I highlight today, along with policy recommendation and analysis of financing sources. Let me close with stressing once more that a project-driven approach is not more enough. Countries need a wide-reaching strategy that supports the structural shift while making sure that people and communities can thrive and that the economy are more inclusive, just, and resilient. ARENA stands ready to support Colombia in its pathway as a regional leader in the energy transition centered around renewables. With that, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank you, Dr. Lacamera, for sharing with us this intervention on the new technologies that contribute to development and the positioning of the Colombian power sector. In order to supplement the presentation of Dr. Lacamera, now I would like to give the floor to the market analyst, Mr. Bosch, a mechanical engineer with a master's degree in technologies and sustainable energy of the Technological University of Eindhoven, the Netherlands. In his professional work, he has advised and oriented countries on policies related to technological innovation, quality control and standardization for the successful implementation of renewable energy. He has developed technical standards to quantify the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. He has supported the negotiations on climate change under the Convention of United Nations on Climate Change. He has provided consultancy services for the development of renewable energy projects and energy efficiency in DNVGL, and he has designed and implemented projects related to infrastructure and energy in the sector of vehicle manufacturing. Good morning. I would like to thank Acolgen for this invitation. And also, I would like to thank IRENA for contributing to such an important Congress that, given the circumstances, it needs to be virtual. It is a pleasure to share with you an outlook on world energy transition, the analysis of IRENA, mainly focusing on the topic of electrification, innovation, and socio-economic benefits related to the transition. As it was mentioned by our General Director, Dr. Francesco Lacamera, the energy sector is critical for decarbonization of the global economy. The energy sector represents more than 2/3 of all the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. Hence, if we really want to mitigate the climate change effect, we must focus on decarbonization of the power sector. We are seeing quite a progress progress, and we see that more and more countries are planning a strategy of net zero target. And at IRENA, we are conducting the analysis to support our member countries in this decarbonization process. The first step is to clearly identify which are the components on which we must focus for the decarbonization of the global power sector. And as it was mentioned by Mr. La Camera, we have identified 6 components which are considered key: renewable energy, energy efficiency, electrification with renewable power, green hydrogen, carbon capture of fossil fuels, and carbon capture of bioenergy sources. At the present time, the energy sector issues around 37 gigatons of carbon, and of all these components that I have previously mentioned, there are 3 that are the most important because they give us 3/4 of all the emissions that we require for the next 30 years. So first, we have renewable energy, energy expansion based on renewables, 2, energy efficiency that accounts for 25%, and the third one is electrification with renewable energy. And when we speak about electrification, we are referring to replacing the energy systems that are used based on liquid fossil fuels, for example, the ground transportation sector, the maritime transportation sector, the air transportation sector, the thermal sector, industry sector that use oil or coal byproducts, replacing them with electricity, as is the case of electric vehicles, heat pumps, electric boilers, using renewable electricity. These 3 components can allow us to have more than 70% of the emissions that we must reduce from here to mid this century. If we take a look at the global energy sector, in spite of last year's pandemic, which is still there, it was a great year for renewable energy worldwide. What we see on this graph is the increase in installed generation capacity every year. The gray bars represent the increase in non-renewables using fossil fuels, and the blue bars are the new generation using renewable energy. And what we see is that as of the year 2012, the blue bars are increasing, are bigger, which means that every year we are increasingly investing in renewable energy more so than in fossil fuel generation. Last year, it was a record year in which more than 80% of all the investments in energy were based on wind, photovoltaic, and marine energy. Last year, more than 260 gigawatts of renewable energy were installed in 1 year. Just to put you into this context, the installed capacity of a country such as Colombia in order to electrify the country is of around 18-20 gigawatts. This means that in 1 year, more than 13 times the installed capacity of a country such as Colombia. We're invested in wind turbines, solar panels, geothermal energy, etc. in 1 year. So that's the size of the investments that we are experiencing now in terms of renewable energy compared to conventional energy. And if we take a look at the case of Europe, and that is where our innovation and technological center is located here in Bonn, Germany. Last year, which was a critical year because of the pandemic, it shows very interesting data. In a large system, such as the European one, most of the generation with fossil fuels, which are the figures in red, dropped when compared to 2019. Coal generation dropped more than 18%, nuclear dropped more than 11%, and energy based on gas dropped 7%. This is because of a reduction in demand because of the pandemic. Electricity based on renewables increased more than 4%. At present, more than 40% of all the power generation in Europe comes from renewable energy, and mainly solar and wind energy. When I joined IRENA around 9 years ago, our member countries were saying, but to have more than 10% of penetration or 15% of penetration of renewable energy is going to collapse the power sectors. It is going to increase the price of utilities. But after many years, we have seen that that's not true. Many countries, including Denmark, Portugal, Spain, Texas, California, in the US, they have power systems with a penetration of variable renewable energy of more than 30 or 50%. And the systems continue operating in a cost-effective and optimal manner. In other words, it has been shown once again during a pandemic year that renewable energies provide power in a resilient manner. The moment it is required at higher level, but more important than this, it is provided in a cost-effective manner. And obviously, that is something that we are seeing not only in Europe, but worldwide, including Colombia. In Colombia, we have seen quite a progress in recent years when it comes to renewable energy. In Colombia, they call it unconventional because they have a hydro, that's the case of wind and solar energy. IRENA worked with UPME, working on a flexibility analysis of the power sector in order to identify bottlenecks and to identify the participation of wind and solar energy, and we see that the Colombian power sector is quite flexible. Actually, there are no drawbacks to include or incorporate renewable energy in the system. That's the chart that we see on the left-hand side. So we see here the flexibility with green dots, which means that we are doing very good. Yellow, it's medium, and the red is like bottlenecks. The only two topics that we have identified, and Colombia is aware of that could be somewhat complicated. It's interconnection capacity with our neighboring countries. We are still talking about the interconnection with Panama. That's still unfinished business. And the other one is the geographical dispersion of, for example, wind energy in La Guajira and the transmission issues. But even with that, to reach the target of the government by 2022, almost 3 gigawatts of additional capacity, it's no problem actually by 2030 to reach more than 5-6 gigawatts of wind and solar energy do not represent technical problems, because in Colombia, we are striving with more than 300 kilometers from La Guajira, another line on the Atlantic coast. And very recently, we've seen that battery system to back up the network, mainly when it comes to primary resources, to provide power and to balance the grid when it's it is needed the most. We have seen an installed battery capacity of 7 megawatts. That's something that we have installed in the Department of Atlántico. That's not only in Colombia. There are studies that indicate that some states of the United States and also in Australia, the large-scale battery systems, utility-scale batteries are even cheaper than peaker gas plants. So this has an impact when we rethink about the firm markets or capacity markets, where we see new technologies providing faster services and in a more cost-effective manner, more so than thermal energy or thermal generation. And beyond the supply-related topic, we have the flexibility topic. This is changing the paradigm. In the past, as we can see in the left-hand side graph, flexibility was coming on only from generation following demand. But this is changing, and that's no longer the case. Now, demand can follow generation by means of demand management, of demand response, and also distribution systems are becoming more flexible with modern technology, and also with the use of batteries, like virtual transmission systems that are being used in France, Germany, Italy, United States, and Australia. So we are finding flexibility sources everywhere. So it's not only that I need flexible generation, and if I don't have it, I have to add capacity or firmness or flexible plants such as gas generation that can follow demand. No, this is being revisited, and we have finding new flexibility forms that are making this simpler and cheaper. And all this is based on innovation. Technological innovation as the one we see in blue: digitalization, green hydrogen, battery system, electrification, electric vehicles, etc. But generation goes beyond technology. Innovation is also necessary in business models. For example, we are seeing now peer-to-peer trading, virtual power plants that small units that are virtually added, so they will behave as a large power plant, energy as a service systems, and also innovation in regulation and in market design with new flexibility capacity markets, and also the new ways in the system operation. For example, managing hydraulic storage. Colombia has quite a potential in that area. And also intercommunication amongst the systems, the operators of the distribution, generation system, that they are sharing data among the different entities operating the system. These are all critical innovations. At IRENA, we conducted a thorough project in 2019. It is available. Actually, the document is in English, but the executive summary is in Spanish, where we have identified 30 key innovations for power systems. And as you see, 11 of these innovations are in technology, storage, system digitalization, future grids, but also we have identified a large number of necessary innovation in business models, market designs, as for example, increasing the granularity of these special systems, capacity markets, regional markets, dynamic fees for users, and new regulatory topics and innovation when it comes to system operation, the new role of distribution system or the operators of distribution systems. Now they aggregate and provide services for transmission systems. As was mentioned previously, the dynamic lightweighting, the use of large utility batteries, virtual transmission lines. All these innovations are available in our analysis, which is on our webpage. And because of this, we have been rethinking about power systems. It is, we say that that it is costly, and no, there are many alternatives nowadays that can really back up this flexibility and can make of it a cost-effective one.
And thanks to all these developments in the electric sector, we see electricity today differently. What do I mean? This is Irena's analysis, not only for the electric global sector, but for the whole world electric sector. To the left, we have the global energy consumption back in 2018. And what we see on this graph on the left is that only 20% of the power consumed globally was in the form of electricity. The remaining 80% was basically using liquid fossil fuels, which means that even though when we speak about energy, we usually think of electricity, electricity is only a small part, a small share of the whole energy global matrix. But since electricity is becoming increasingly competitive and clean, in the future, electricity will be the king of the electric vectors. What do we mean by that? Let's look at the right of the graph. Electricity will be covering more than 50% of the global demand, or should be covering more than 50% of the global demand of energy, in order to be able to decarbonize our global energy systems, meaning that we have to electrify everything to the extent that we can. Vehicles, small planes, trucks, boilers, etc. Because renewable energy is not only cleaner, but cheaper. And the remaining 12% here is green hydrogen, which is also electrification, because it's what we call indirect electrification, using electricity through electrolysis, producing a molecule, the molecule of hydrogen, and this molecule of hydrogen being used for the chemical and petrochemical industry, for synthetic fuels, etc. So if we add this up, basically 72% of the global power consumption should come from electricity, and the rest, biomass and other types of low-carbon fuels. So electricity should be the king of the electric vectors in the future. I think that this is great news for Acolgen because there are huge business opportunities, which is what the next graph shows, the one that I was mentioning before. To the extent that we can, we should be electrifying as much as we can. On the left, we see electricity consumption globally. Basically, in the year 2018, we had about 20,000 terabytes per hour of electricity consumed. And basically, in the industrial sector and in the residential and commercial sectors, buildings, basically. But if we look at the bar on the right, in these outlook, looking at 2050, this will change because we will be needing more than 3 times, or we will be consuming more than 3 times the electricity that we are consuming today, more than 70,000 terabytes an hour, but also in other sectors. The electric sector, electric vehicles, almost 12,000 terabytes per hour, and the generation of green hydrogen, more than 20,000 terabytes per hour. 20,000 terabytes per hour just to generate green hydrogen. Let's imagine. It's as if all the electricity being used by the planet today, all of that will be used in 2050 for the production of green hydrogen. So that's the magnitude of the transformation that we are envisaging based on clean electricity. And this brings about 2 things that we have to look at. The first one, the massive capacity of renewable energy that we must be installing until 2050. And it's really massive. the amount of electricity that we must be generating through renewable energies is of a very large scale. We have to accelerate investments for new generations in additional renewable energies. And the second topic is that looking at all these electric loads like electric vehicles and electrolyzers for the generation of green hydrogen, etc., we will have to think also of what will be the demand peaks depending on the load profile of these new systems, because this will determine investment on infrastructure, on transmission, on distribution, transformers, etc. That's why we have to do it in an intelligent manner, because we have to find the way to balance out, to manage these load profiles in such a way that they will be friendly with the electric system and that they will not be producing major restrictions or costs to the electric system. So it's an intelligent electrification, the kind of electrification that we need. And to give you an example of what I mean by this, in the cities, let's use the example of EVs, the load of electric vehicles in the city of Hamburg in Germany. The distributing entity in the city of Hamburg has carried out an analysis about what would be the impact on the distribution grid or network of having about 60,000 electric vehicles from now until 2025 in the city. Having 60,000 electric vehicles in the city and having them all getting loaded in the evening at the same time would require option A that we see there, that it would be a reinforcement of more than 10,000 kilometers of cables in the distribution network or grid to replace more than half of the electric transformers in the city, and open up new ways and roads to bring and build a new cable that would call for months and months of public works in the city. And the cost would be of about 20 million euros in only 3 years. But on the other hand, an intelligent option B, and what do I mean by that? Smart, through the use of digital solutions, the simultaneity of the loading of these electric vehicles could be reduced by more than 80%, enabling the distributing entity to control the load of these EVs, should it be necessary. In this case, the digitalization and having intelligent loading points managed by the distributing agent would make it possible to reduce investments on the distribution grid to only 2 million euros. And it's not only a matter of money. We would avoid all those endless months of public works that would entail big problems also for the citizens living in the city of Hamburg. So it's a reduction of investment in a proportion of 1 to 10 between an electrification solution being intelligent and a solution for electrification without control. Innovation will continue being the underpinning factor in all of this in order to successfully implement this electrification. But let's talk about the social and economic benefits, especially now that we're speaking about the economic recovery after the pandemic or beyond the COVID pandemic. Let's talk about employment generation. IRENA's analysis shows that more than 11 million people are being hired already today in the renewable energy sector. Basically, photovoltaic energies, bioenergy, and hydraulic energy, followed by wind energy and solar thermal systems. More than 11 million people. And even more interesting, the rate of job generation per each $1 million invested on renewable energies, according to our study, for every $1 million invested on renewable energies, around 30 direct jobs are generated. This is 3 times more than the oil and gas sector, for instance, where on average, $1 million invested on oil and gas generate about 10 firm fixed employments. So renewable energies, seen from the point of view of investment, generate 3 times more jobs than the conventional systems of generation. And not only that, if we look at gender equity or balance, today, more than 30% of the labor force in the renewable energy sector are women. More efforts are necessary to reach 50%. But anyway, this indicator shows that it is much better than the oil and gas sector, where women's participation in the labor force of this sector accounts for only 10 to 15%. So more employment, more gender equality, more social equity, more income for the economy. Now let's talk about investments and business opportunities. This energy transition, if we look at the right-hand bar between 2021 and 2050, will require, according to our analysis, investments of about $131 billion, billion in English. We have a difference there, but in our units would be $131 trillion. So we should be investing about $4.4 billion per year on energy efficiency, renewable energies, electrification, etc. Just to give you some context, the country's GDP, Colombia's GDP, should be around $350 billion, meaning that we need investments every year on renewable energies almost 10 times higher than the whole size of the Colombian economy. In other words, the investments are massive. Also, what's coming up in terms of business opportunities is huge. The financial markets are already reacting to this new paradigm, to these changes in energy transition. This slide shows the Standard & Poor's financial indicator. In the orange line, we see the S&P 500 for energy, for conventional energy, meaning gas and oil. And in blue, the S&P Global Clean Energy Index, basically renewable energies. So the stock exchange indicators S&P for oil and gas in 2020 and the pandemic fell by more than 30%, while the S&P index for renewable energies went up more than 130%. And the trend, in spite of the changes brought about by the pandemic, and the profile is being changed somewhat, anyway, the gap between the returns obtained between conventional energies and renewable energies are becoming larger and larger, meaning that the financial markets are already reacting to energy transition. And this is something that we see every day. An increasing number of businesses in oil and gas and some other traditional businesses are incorporating themselves into electrification and renewable energies, etc. And of course, these opportunities, these economic opportunities, are being noticed in Colombia as well. IRENA has created what we know as the Coalition for Action. This Coalition for Action is a group of private companies and investor entities that advise the agency on topics related to markets, including companies such as Enel, General Electric, and some conventional energy companies, etc. Last year, in 2020, this Coalition for Action published a study about the five most attractive emerging markets for renewable energies at a global level. And in those 5 markets, Colombia was included. Why? Because Colombia is showing to be a leader, not only locally, as to expect by 2030 more than 5 gigabytes on renewable energies, and the strategies that are being developed locally, and hopefully this year by 2021 the year will close with more than 700 additional megawatts in renewable unconventional energies, but also at a regional level with initiatives such as that all the countries in the Latin American region will follow the purpose of producing more than 70% of their electricity based on renewable energies. And today, already several countries of the region are joining this initiative that was born in Colombia. And this Coalition for Action last year mentioned some suggestions for Colombia in order to continue on this good pathway. But most of these recommendations are already being adopted by the corresponding governmental and non-governmental entities in the country, including, for instance, new market designs and regulatory frameworks aimed at unconventional renewable energies. The Regulatory Commission, Craig, is already working on this. Auctions, there was a very successful one, and another one is coming up this year, looking at a more balanced risk distribution, especially in the agreements for purchasing electricity adjusted already to the situation. The long-term strategy for the development of electric grids. We already mentioned the expansion plans of the transmission systems, for instance, La Guajira, with more than 700 kilometers of new high-voltage transmission lines, etc., and reinforcing the inclusion of social and economic aspects in local communities, not only in La Guajira, but also in all the other sectors and regions where these mega projects or even smaller projects will be built for communities based on renewable energies. So the idea is to include the participation of these local communities in these projects, which is also another thing that the country is looking at and working on already. So it is clear that all these aspects, not only regarding the environmental benefits, but also the profitability offered by renewable energies, is becoming increasingly clear. The costs, the way they have been reduced in the use of renewable energies, are important. Let me refer now to the previous slide again. The cost of renewable energies is dropping drastically. This is our analysis for cost reduction for different renewable energy technologies between the years 2010 and 2019. Next month, we will be publishing our new analysis going up to 2020. But here we see in the photovoltaic sector more than 80% of cost reduction in 10 years. The stripe that we see here in gray, this band, is the cost band that shows generation with a fossil fuel resources, and we see how practically all the renewable energies are competitive vis-a-vis the lowest cost band of conventional energies. And increasingly, we see more and more records